Good morning, Quirk. What is up, Quirky fam? This is episode 4 of the Quirkie Cast podcast, a Web3 podcast for you and me and everyone who likes to get a little bit quirky. I'm going to hit this intro, and I got a very special guest on the other side of this for you. So stick around and let's get to it. Let's get quirky.
In a wormhole, probably about to burn. In a white tunnel, are you ever gonna learn? See a land, probably gonna merge. Gonna be dead laying in the dirt. Funny how you smart, but you still a nerd. Play your part, girl gon' turn. Act hard, girl gon' learn.
All right, if it's your first time joining us, we want to thank you for that. Be sure to subscribe to the show or follow on whatever podcasting platform you are listening to. Leave us a 5-star rating and review. That would be awesome, and it helps the show get noticed by more Quirkies and more Web3 enthusiasts. So if you could do that, I would appreciate it. Before we get going, I want to give a couple of disclaimers I always try to do. Number one, I am part of the Quirky community, but this podcast is not officially associated with the Quirky's, the brand. So all the thoughts and opinions shared here are from that of a Quirky holder and somebody deeply entrenched in the community, but not somebody who is a part of the overall narrative and, executive decision making of the brand. So just bear with me there. Remember that. And the purpose of the show, is kind of, 80-20 Quirky's Web3. And I want to document, entertain, engage, and educate people on Web3 from the perspective of someone like me, a little bit quirky. So today I have a very special guest to bring up and interview with us. Be sure to go check out the last episode 3. I have my man Plus on here. If you know him from the Twitter Spaces or on Twitter, get to know him. And actually, before we bring up Dave, our guest for today, I want you to make sure to check out. There is a resource now in the description of the show, put out by my man Cluse, who was on yesterday, and it's kind of a tool book or a playbook on how to protect yourself or be careful, in security in Web3, which we actually had a space about last night. But I don't want to ramble on too much longer. I'm gonna bring in my man Dave here. This is Dave versus Axey. If you are on the Twitters first, he is one of our 1-for-1 holders. Quirk, Dave, how you doing?
Have a quirky day, Jordan. How you doing?
I'm doing awesome, man. It's awesome to have you on here. I really appreciate it. You're our first one-of-one guest. Tell us a little bit about your one-of-one, because it is unique even among our one-of-ones.
Sure, yeah. So for me, I was actually just looking to try to get a one-of-one. I've always had the goal in any project that I really believed in to spend up and get a one-of-one. And so for me, this skeleton that kind of had like the pink and blue bubbles was sitting at the floor at the time for 5 ETH on the first day of reveal. And I just thought it was great. I've always kind of I liked the Finch skull initially, but then kind of seeing this one-of-one skeleton with the bubbles was just sweet. And so picked it up and haven't looked back.
Yeah, well, you're a great owner of that PFP. You've been rocking it ever since you got it. It is, like I said, very unique. The background with the bubbles, there aren't any other ones quite like that. And you kind of do have a variation of the Finch skull. Maybe that is the original Finch skull. I mean, who knows? Maybe that's Finch himself. I mean, we can build this narrative out however we like. So that's an awesome Quirky. Y'all make sure you follow Dave at Dave versus Axey on Twitter. Before we jump into the show and the meat of getting to know Dave, want to bring up our trait of the week. Last show's trait was the Mega Blue Mohawk, which I talked about with Clus. To this week's trait, I decided to go with the pink goo. There's a few prominent community members that have this in their PFP. It's actually purple, which is interesting to me that it's called pink goo. Right now, the floor price for a pink goo Quirky is 1.9999. So basically 2. It's a really cool trait. It's cool to have that trait if you're using it as your PFP coming down off of, you have that not like dead space, but to have something above the Quirky's head or above your PFP's head. Do you have any of the pink goo in your collection?
I don't even think I have any of the goo. I was actually checking over into OpenSea right now to see if I have any. Last I checked, I don't think I do.
That's one of the traits I would like to get, because I get the guys and gals who have it in their PFP. I'm always a little bit jealous because I do like the way that it connects the upper part of your PFP and the lower part, and it just looks really good. I mean, the detail work in the splashes, the shading inside, everything about it is it's an interesting trait. It is a 1% trait, so all Quirkies are definitely rare. consider yourself blessed if you got yourself a pink goo Quirky out there, ladies and gentlemen. So leave us a comment, on the official Twitter for the podcast. Let us know which pink goo you have. We'll, retweet all of those, get you guys a little bit of shine. But Dave, let's go ahead and start talking about you and, what brought you into the community. You have chosen to, if you're going to dox yourself, tell us your full name and what you're really all about, or do you want to just tell us a little bit about your Web3 identity?
Yeah. So, I'm pretty well doxxed. I haven't really released my full name to many, so I won't do that. But I will say, if you really do want to try to find me, my Bored Ape is my profile picture on LinkedIn, so I'm not that hard to find necessarily. But I've talked a lot about like where I'm from. Like right now, I'm in Arkansas. I'm from the Northeast.
Really?
31. Yeah.
I'm in Southeast Missouri, so we're not that far off.
Oh, nice. I'm actually in Northwest Arkansas, so we're really close. And so I've been here about 2 years and from the Northeast originally, 31 years old. And yeah, so I started initially into Web3 a little over a year ago, into NFTs and crypto a little bit before that. And so I jumped in initially into Axey Infinity. And I did buy my first actual NFT outside of Axey was a Chubby's NFT, which ended up being a semi-rug. It was actually a stolen IP, which was interesting at the time. They've since supposedly patched it up with the original founder. But yeah, so I've been kind of in this space initially within the Axey Infinity community. That's why I created my Twitter profile, Dave vs. Axey. Created it right about a year ago and just started kind of making content for Axey Infinity because there wasn't much out there. And to start a team back then was $800 to $1,000. So it just was so expensive to get into a video game when, if you're from video game culture, $60 was always like your entry point for the last 10 years. So, but to not have anything on Twitch or YouTube, really, I was like, well, I had the computer, I was comfortable speaking publicly, and I was like, why not just try to make informational videos to help people onboard into the community? And so that garnered me a lot of views and followers, which I really appreciate. And I just kind of continue to follow along that path of not really being overtly shiller into a project or like within Axey. I never take anything from Axey for payments or from, I've now done like an AMA with a new game called Crypto Unicorns. That's just me organically, like, hey, I'm into this project, I'm investing in it, let's find out more information from the founders or just my personal opinions on things, just to kind of help share guidance into whatever you're doing. And that's kind of what I try to bring within the Quirky's community too, when I joined it a little over a month ago.
Forgive me, what is Axey? Can you tell myself and the listeners a little bit about what Axey is?
Sure, yeah. So Axey is I believe I'm gonna call it, if not the original, because I think it might be CryptoKitties, but I would say it's one of the original play to earn NFT based video games. And so they've been around for 4 years. So if you think about NFTs, like they've been around longer than CryptoPunks. And so 4 years ago, they had created their kind of origin tokens, which initially started out breeding the Axeys or kind of created the Axeys out of thin air. And then from there, all the other Axeys that have been created by players. So initially, you'd think if you're going to go buy a character or catch a character, you're buying it from the dev team. So their developers are a team called Sky Mavis. In this game, though, you bought the tokens from them, and that was for the first 4,000 Axeys, and then another roughly 3,000 that were called MEOs were all bought from Sky Mavis. Every other Axey out of those first 7,000 were created by players playing the game, earning SLP, and then breeding the Axeys together. And so now there's over 13 million. And so over 13 million of these Axeys have been created by a character and then usually sold to another player. So there's obviously a ton of value created back to the people that are breeding back in the day. It's now since become a little bit unprofitable. But yeah, so it's this whole game, and then it turns into a 3v3, almost Hearthstone card-like battler, where you have cards in your Axeys, which are their body parts. So you can't just like kind of change your deck anytime you want. You actually have to breed or buy the Axey that you want to play with. And yeah, and so there's seasons, and like this season, I think they're giving away something close to $3 million or something like that, or in prizes for the top players this season. I think top prize is like 20 or 30K, something like that.
This game sounds awesome. I've literally never heard of this, but it sounds incredible.
And that's crazy too, like, right? So their blockchain is Ronin. They're the second most used blockchain in all of the world. And it's mostly because of Axey being on it. The only NFTs on the blockchain are Axey.
Is Axey? Wow. Yeah. So they pulled that much volume just off that game. So it really is wow.
their worst days in the last 7 months have been $1 million days in volume. Their best days, they were doing $30 million in volume on
Oh my
days.
gosh, man!
Nuts.
I grew up, just a little about me. I didn't grow up playing video games. My dad was very like, he hated video games. He told me flat out one Christmas, he's like, if somebody gets you a video game, you're not gonna play it. I was like, gosh darn it. So I would always play with my buddies, but I never really got deep into the video game culture. But I definitely had really close buddies that even guys now that, with Madden and with
Mhm.
WoW, and I saw what happened, how people, and it's still going on today. So it's something I've always kind of missed out on, but this sounds, it ended up playing a couple of phone games as I, became an adult and could do what I wanted, Dad. But it sounds like there's some really cool, games on the blockchain that I need to familiarize myself with because there's earning potential, like for
Yeah,
real.
specifically with Axie, they'll wait. In about 2 weeks, they're going to release it's called their version 3. It's called Origin, and it will be free to play to start. So,
Okay.
so you can actually test the game. They'll have free Axies for you to test out. You won't be able to earn anything from it, but then if you decide it's worthwhile and you want to get into it, you can then go buy your Axies on Ronin and then
What is an
play.
Axey? Is it like a dog? Is it like a bird? Like,
Oh man, I want to. Yeah, let me. I'll send
send
you.
me a link because I definitely want to check this thing out.
Yeah, I will.
If anybody else out there is an Axie head and wants to give me the 411, hit me on Twitter.
So there have been, I will say, there are a lot of Axie owners that are in Quirky's. I think
Cool.
I didn't like necessarily go shill it to them, but I think a lot of them picked up on me investing into the project and just being a huge fan, and so there were many that jumped in pretty quickly. So we probably have, I would guess, there's at least 30 Axie holders that are within the Quirky space. Um,
Nice.
yeah,
Well, if I
so
do get into it, I've already sounds like I got a squad. I don't know if you guys do like, what do you call them, like squads or groups or anything like that in the game, but you
there
guys
are
can protect
guilds.
me.
Yeah,
Yeah,
so
circle the
there.
wagons.
Yeah, yes.
This sounds fun. Well, I'll definitely be looking into that. Let's we started talking about Quirky's. What was your initial attraction to Quirky's? I think we all kind of had a moment, I feel like, where it was like, it happens in things in Web3, but I feel like everybody's moment was kind of similar, where it's like they saw it and were like, oh shit, I gotta get one. Like, was your moment like that? All right, I'm seeing it.
No, you're right. I just dropped you the link too. So, uh, no, my moment wasn't like that necessarily. I was actually holding on to, I think, about 8 ETH at the time between my two wallets, and I was just looking for something to get into. And so I've been holding that ETH for 20, 30 days, which is a long time to be sitting on that much ETH. And
Yeah.
so I was just looking for the right project. And I'd done a couple just like goofy projects just for fun, or, maybe they 5-10x on a really low floor, like kind of a derivative project that's just kind
Mm-hmm.
of like, I put in a couple $100. If it works, it works. If it doesn't, it doesn't. I don't really care. And I was just watching all the new mints that people were going after, and I hated them. Like, I didn't trust the teams, and everyone's number one, if the number one selling point of a project was it was a docs team, like that was immediately just a no for
Yeah.
me. Um, and so yeah, so I happened to be just hanging out on a Saturday night. I just had my kid, who now is like 6-7 weeks old, so it ended up being really good timing that I was taking this kind of night shift until about midnight. And that night on a Saturday night, you guys were just doing a space, or the Quirkies were doing a space. And so I jumped in. They told me they've been running the space for almost 24 hours straight since reveal. They talked to me about how it went from, below mint price. Now it's already 8x to 0.4. And so all of that I couldn't believe as to how crazy that jump had all worked out. And so I just kind of jumped in from there, and I was like, all right, let's look at the art. And so I saw all the profile pictures. I thought they were sick. And then I just kind of jumped in, saw what the floor was and what was around there. So I just went and swept, I think 5 or 6 within a half hour of me being in that space. And then I knew I had the 5 ETH on my cold wallet, and I was like, dang, like, should I look at one of ones? And so sure enough, there one of ones were almost exactly 5 ETH. And I kept talking to the group, trying to figure out more, reviewing the roadmap. There was a couple like yellow flags that did nervous me, but I was like, you know what? No, this community, no one does this for 24 hours. I don't even care if it's the first day. And they did seem pretty tight. They all seemed like they were really optimistic on it. I knew that a lot of them were newer to NFTs, so I could feel that. And I was like, well, if I come in and I go big, I think I could help add influence and guidance on a positive note, like not tell them don't sell until whatever, but
Mm-hmm.
just actually give them guidance. Like, if you need to sell now, sell now. If you don't, you don't. and just have those candid conversations. And sure enough, that's kind of how it worked out. And then we were fortunate too. We had others kind of join in, like Clint Apewood and Carson, who are obviously other big ape holders that then kind of just help naturally sharing it too. And it's grown into what it is today. It's crazy.
Yeah, I believe I'm at my either I'm a 1 month anniversary Quirky holder today or yesterday, but I was in the spaces. I wasn't one of the mentors or anything either. I got in around point 2, which was I think it was 2 days after Mint. But I remember I did the same thing you did. I would jump in one of the spaces and was just listening. And I remember, I don't know if it was you or somebody else, but I think it might have been you. You were up on the stage and you were kind of like you just described right now. You were very bullish on it. And, even then you were talking about how a lot of the equity is anchored in what was happening right then and there. And that's what's, going on a little quirky tangent here, but if anybody's listening to this and hasn't been in some of the other spaces or other projects, and this is your first project, like you probably don't understand how completely and truly blessed you are. Because I've been in I'm in other things and you are too. And that, again, 60, 70, 80% of this stuff it is scary. A lot of it is still teetering on that. Is it going to zero or is this actually going to be something? And you go into these spaces and they're not like Quirky spaces where it's just us, literally Quirk members holding the spaces and then Quirk team members like showing up and joining us. It's a lot of it's a lot of these project people, scheduling. They're almost like meetings, and you go in and you listen to them and they're scary, and they're not like Quirky meetings where people are having fun. It's meetings where people are like, so like basically like roundabout asking like, is this over? Like it's like that out there in the NFT space if you're not in Quirky's in some of these projects, ladies and gentlemen. So this is something like you said, you noticed it was special. And for me, what initially pulled me in was, the art. I saw one and I just said, this is good. And I'm not like an artist, but I'm in a point in my life where I trust my judgment on a lot of stuff because I've listened to other people and missed a lot of good things that I was like, I don't think you're seeing it right. So I saw Quirky's and I was like, yeah, they look like goofy gumballs with, faces drawn on them at first, maybe if you don't actually look at them, but if you actually look into like what is right before your eyes, you could see that there was something, and again, across the whole palette, something meaningful there. So there's a Quirky for everybody, but also there's only 5,000 Quirkies, ladies and gentlemen. So get in while the getting's good. We have a great community going here. Another thing I like to bring up for me, I looked at it and I saw the art and I was trying to find something to flip. And I was like, oh, this is going to go up and I'll flip it. I bought more and I bought another one. And I bought another one. And I'm like diamond hands. Like, I don't want to sell. Like, I have almost an emotional connection, which I know I shouldn't. But I'm just like, because of the value that I saw before anybody else did. And I feel like we have several prominent community members that have come in like, yeah, I came in to flip and I'm sitting on 6 Quirkies now. Like, what's up? There's a lot of value, I think, to that. But was that ever a thought for you? You did say you sold a couple, to kind of regain your I don't want to say your losses, but to regain some of your initial investment.
Yeah, I haven't. Well, no, it actually was just so candidly. I brought in that 8 ETH I was kind of sitting on was mostly going to be going towards taxes this season from gains from last year.
Mm-hmm.
So I still will need to sell some stuff at some point, whether it's Quirky's or Meebits or Carrefour, who knows. But I've tested waters with a bunch of other projects recently, just trying to prove some more of my conviction on stuff. But yeah, I don't really think that's a really net positive. I never thought about flipping per se. I definitely thought, okay, if I hold on some of these rares, I don't try to hold a ton of a project ever, especially in a 5,000 project. Like Ryan still is holding 180 plus that he at some point has to start letting some of those go, in my opinion. A, it's going to be better to just allow more people in the community. But B, just also for him, he's got to start he's probably putting in over 100 ETH and so haven't some others. So for me, it's what I really liked about the project is even if the roadmap was a little vague, with how strong the community was, the number one thing that I'm super optimistic on in the space that I don't think many talk about enough is open IP and licensing rights. And so for me, like that's something that I'm really bullish on over the next 1 to 10 years is some of these projects that are going to make it. are going to have those open IP and open licensing rights, and they're going to be utilized by the community members to help grow. So if nothing else changes, right, I then spent, I don't even know off the top of my head, maybe $100,000 on art that I can then go do whatever I want to. And so I can go start a streetwear brand of my own, not call it Quirky's, but just kind of use the actual characters, or go put it onto CPG packaging or whatever it ends up being. And so for me, I think that I'm optimistic on that future, and how can that kind of evolve forward. And especially if you can start to get a suite of products, how that's kind of going to grow into the future.
Yeah, I think that's something that's helped a lot of people want to stay in it too, is like you said, the ability to create with it, because Web3 does, financial gains are part of it, yes, but it also is a lot of artistic minded and creative minded individuals. And those are, amongst the NFT space, open IP on a good project. I mean, that's not something you come across, not something that mints every day, shall we say.
Right. No, that sounds true.
All right. Well, we're kind of getting closer here towards wrapping up, but what is your personal vision for Quirky's, the brand, and the community? Like, what would you like to, see? There's a lot going on. What is your kind of thoughts, and what are you kind of projecting, or what do you see for the future of Quirky's as we continue to grow?
Yeah, I think there's so what I'm most optimistic on a lot of the projects I'm in, be it like CyberKongz, Doodles, Bored Ape Yacht Club, Cool Man to some regards to. I really like brands that are leading the pack versus just following what everyone else is doing. And so for Quirky's, that they obviously, Sin has kind of this vision where he wants to make a streetwear brand around the actual Quirky's IP, the brand IP. And I'm really think that others are doing merch. He's saying, no, we're not just doing merch. Like, we're going to make a brand. And so I think that's a really, it could be expensive, but that's an appealing differentiation for me that I want to see how it plays out. I still think the art from Finch is really strong. And so I'm curious to see how the companions work out. I also think game theory right now is really prominent. And so there's a lot of things they could add around game theory, and potentially even pivot into just people being able to kind of control their actions, or be it like, do they open the egg to a companion if it's an egg, or do they reveal it, or do they just leave it unrevealed to kind of like hold value in it? Like for me, I'm still holding my CyberKong baby as an incubator. And just because like at some point, 2 years on the road, someone's going to want to open an incubator, and there's not going to be many left over to do that. Similar with like serums on the mutant apes. So I think that there's a lot of potential to kind of just play around that. But the challenge from the Quirky side is they don't have a massive budget. Like they didn't mint 10,000. They didn't mint at a 0.1 or a 0.2. The people complain the royalties are high, but ultimately, like if you look at the math behind it too, like it's crazy. Like some people's portfolios are worth in value right now of Quirky's. Like Ryan's portfolio is worth more than what Sin raised on the entire sale. Like it's crazy to think about that.
Yeah.
It is like not even close, really. Like Ryan's portfolio is probably worth 350 ETH or more. And since when he sold the whole project, it was only 250 ETH he raised at mint. Obviously, he's made more in royalties. We've had a lot of sales, which is good. So yeah, I think that they're going to be not cash constrained, but they have to be cash conscious as to how they're going to spend and what they're going to spend it on. But for me, I think our community is so strong. It's got to be event driven is really what I'm hopefully looking forward to within the future of Quirky's. Like the merch brand is going to be important. Companions are going to be cool. But either how do we expand the community to more people? Like to do companions end up becoming, a second tier, almost like, mutants or dogs did a little bit to Bored Ape Yacht Club. Like they're still valued. They're still a part of the, they're still Quirky, but they're a Quirky companion versus being the OG Quirky. Just to create a bigger community available, because the challenge is when you only have 5,000 right now, 2,500 holders, that's not a lot of people across the world. And so if you're trying to do things in Australia and Europe and the US or South America, it's going to be hard to bring everyone together unless they're centralized around like an NFT NYC or other big events that are happening already.
And having just act more of the, the NFTs available, more entry to that community, like you said.
Right. And so if you can have, if companions get kind of an equal share, let's say there's 5,000 or 7,500 of them or 10,000 of them, I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing if you're trying to get into a good community that is doing some of these things, and it's kind of a similar pass into what those events are going to look like. Now, the challenge is, again, like, you have to kind of prove those events before you can drive interest into the community, you know, or already have kind of that massive hype around what you're bringing. So yeah, there's a lot to be thought of, and go into that too. But
Yeah,
I'm
I
just excited to
feel
kind of see it play out, really.
yeah, I feel like the you know, I mean, I guess the team, as far as I know, is currently, you know, Finch, Sin. He has a social media person, and I don't know how many other people are really involved.
So that's
Eventually,
so that's it, except for
the mods.
their except for the mods, but I think they're on like a contract basis, not
Hmm.
actually on the team. I think Signline might now be officially on the team, but again, I'm not 100% sure of that either. I think he is, though, officially onto the team. But yeah, that was also kind of Sin's strategy, is that he can hire contractors, and then also it's not like a sticky situation where if you have an LLC and you have 7 people and 3 of them decide not to do anything and they're just kind of riding the coattails, it's really hard to kick someone out of an LLC or a partnership agreement, versus, hey, you're a contractor, we're paying you
Yeah,
$1,000 a month, where you're fired, we'll go hire someone else.
yeah. Well, if we're gonna, you know, if you see the future being something that's event driven, you know, you're definitely gonna need more people on the ground, you know, in certain cities, and you know, to kind of make sure that those things are up to snuff, you know, up to quirky standards, shall we say.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I'm interested to see how the team continues to grow, and I guess, you know, the right word, scaling. You know, as we get more high equity holders, as we get more new holders, as our price of entry goes up, you know, eventually we're gonna, you know, that stuff is gonna continue to grow out. And it's been awesome to see the community grow in such a short period of time, and you know, it really does reward our community. To date, you know, really does reward, you know, your value in the community. You know, we've seen a lot of people go out of their way to do very kind and generous things for people they don't really know, just because they see and they believe in something so strongly together, and that's what community is. So, like I've said it before, you know, you know, we talked before the show, always be cynical, and I am a very cynical person, but that to me, in my mind, like I said, trusting myself, because I believe in Quirky's, because it can get through that cynicism of me. I can see the value even more. So I'm very, as they say in the spaces, bullish.
Yeah, and
So
one thing I'll add to that too is, specifically around the community. The best communities I've seen or been a part of have always had that attribute. From, you know, hey, they had their Quirky stolen. We as a community are going to find a way to come back and buy it or get them a different Quirky. You have, um, and other communities have done it a lot, like CyberCon's done it a lot, Board Ape Yacht Club's done it a lot. Doodles hasn't done it too much that I've heard of. I don't really know how many scams they've had to kind of go through. But specifically on Board Ape Yacht Club and CyberCon, it's like their community is crazy around that too. To the point where, like, I know Coco, who's, if you don't know who Coco Berry is, he's an absolute legend. He doesn't tweet that much. He's super undoxed, super private. But if he's in your project, man, like, is he an amazing community member? He talks a ton in Discord, but he'll just like randomly go tip out thousands of dollars of bananas and Kongs. And then, you know, he had one guy, I think he had stolen, or gal had like 7 Kongs stolen. I think a couple Genesis Kongs too. He went and bought them all and then gave them all right back to him. Like, it was just, it was thousands and tens of thousands of dollars and hundreds of thousands of dollars this guy spent just to give them back. And to me, that is like one of the craziest communities ever. But I think that another part there that you have to be fortunate in the community too is not only to have a nice community and people who are, you know, kind to one another. You also have to have a mixture of whales who are kind and just kind individuals beneath them too, kind of growing and working in that community. Because if you don't have someone, you know, I've sold some at cheap, or I haven't given one away yet. I've sold some at cheap to people to kind of help bring them in. I know Prez has done that, Quirk Bear's done that, and I think Jason might has done it as well. But that's just out of the generosity. But they're also in a fortunate position in their NFT career where they're like, hey, if I give this away, a couple $1,000s worth, of my cost basis was maybe 1,000, so I'd net out, you know, lose a profit of a couple grand, or my cost of 1,000 or 2,000. It's not gonna kill them. And that is like, it's not anyone can just do that. Like, definitely me a year ago, there's no way I'm doing that. I did give away a bunch of Axeys coming up, because I was just breeding them, and basically you breed with your own time and work through SLP. But most people are not going to do that. And so I think that is such a crucial part amongst communities too, to be willing and able to do that. And you got to get lucky, I think, to have generous people. Generous whales is an important thing in any community.
Yeah, like I said, we are, I don't know, the community really is, I mean, it is the utility, I mean, you're getting a lot of smart people, a lot of generous people, a lot of open-minded people, and a lot of people that have a lot of good ideas. And, in Web3, um, good ideas are worth something, and we're willing to hear them out, accept them, and grow and take people places. So being a Quirky has been awesome. I got 2 more questions for you before we close her all down. Um, what's one piece of advice you would offer, people trying to quote unquote make it in Web3? Only being involved like a year, and I'm sure a lot of people would say, you've made it. And none of us, if anybody who's made it, I mean, that it's really a journey, not a destination. But what kind of tips would you offer people, maybe outside of the cookie cutter stuff that you might normally hear? Just I'll let you freestyle that one.
Sure. Yeah. Probably the most important part that I would say is it's two or threefold, but the best thing you can do is start being a fake trader. I've encouraged this a lot in spaces. I've said to some other close peers too. Just become a fake trader, because the one thing you don't have is actual monetary value. But pretend to buy 1 or 2 of them and just see where you think that would go, and assume that you can then resell at the floor. If you're still seeing floor purchases go through and you were planning to sell at that point, then you can kind of almost play the stock market game. Now, when you're doing that, a lot of people can say, oh, I made all this money, this is amazing. You have to keep your wins and losses accurate, and you need to it's also a lot easier when you're playing that game to say, oh, it went down, I'm not going to sell now. And I attribute back to, like, if you buy a car, if you go buy a brand new car for 50 grand, immediately when you drive off the lot, it's worth 35. But you don't turn around and say, hey, I don't want the car anymore, and take your 35 grand back. You're like, no, this is my car, and I'm investing in it over the time because it's going to give me the ability to go from point A to point B, or like the flex or whatever it is. There's always reasons for your purchase. In the NFT space, a lot of people get FOMO, and then they get, I don't have a good word for it, but they kind of have like influencer blind eyes. And so they end up just seeing someone or a couple go heavy engagement into a project, and they're like, oh my God, I need to get in there too. And they'll just buy, and that's the reason to buy is, oh, well, these 3 people bought, so I'm buying. That is a terrible way to invest in, because you're not going to have the attachment to it for that car, right? It's almost like if you really want a convertible, but you end up getting a minivan, and they both cost the same amount, but you're like, shit, I don't want this minivan. I really wanted that convertible. And now you're kind of like, how do I get over there? It's because, like, someone said, oh, well, this minivan is going to go up in 2 days. It'll go up by 20%. So now you can take your 50 grand. It's now 60 grand. And then you can come back and get your convertible and save some cash. Like, that's everyone's mindset in this space, which is just not how you should view it. And there are times you can make those plays. And as you get more kind of free cash flow to play around with, you can take some shots like that on whatever reason you have, but you need to be serious about your actual reasons for investing into a project, and really have that conviction around it. So same thing that just happened to me. I jumped to bought 6 Quirky's at 0.4 to 0.5. The next day on day 2, when you got in, they were 0.2. Instead, I'm holding them. I could have bought twice as many, if not more, had I waited one day. But what was my reaction? Was my reaction to sell at 0.2, or was I like, hey, I'm going to try to even buy a couple more right now, dollar cost average in as much as I can, because I'm actually long-term on a project. And so seeing and knowing that is so important when you're getting into a project, and really, what is your sentiment to hold? So, like I also said too, Carrefour, they just announced Hypebeast. I was watching the project for a mint. I wanted to get in. They jumped immediately to 6 ETH. I didn't have that liquidity at the time at all. So I was like, I'm not touching them. I just couldn't afford it. Comes to Hypebeast, they're around 3 ETH. And I was like, shoot, I'm going to buy it. If I think about like Nike Monolith, I see that at 5 ETH right now. I'm like, hey, I could see the upside. And if you start to compare to projects now and have a real understanding as to why something might be pumping, that's important. And so I was like, hey, I could easily see this go to 4 or 5 ETH. So I bought 4. And I told people in the space as I was doing it, I said, if this goes down to 2 or less, I'll have to sell. Like, I can't afford to lose all 12 of this ETH. But if I lose 4 ETH, It sucks, but I'll lose 4 ETH. But I'll hold all the way down until that too. So it got down to I think like 2.2. And I was like, well, this stinks. But I knew my strike point was 2 ETH or less,
Mm-hmm.
and I wasn't going to sell because I knew if I start compiling on, it might also force others, I'm going to pile on too. And so you need to then go and get in the Discord, learn about the community. What is everyone's conviction level? Why are they selling? What's the overarching sentiment too with Ukraine and war and politics on crypto in the US? Like everything there is a factor to what might be driving that price down versus I hate this project or something that people aren't talking about right now. Taxes are due in about a month. People probably just went and got their taxes done in February and early March. They saw, shoot, I owe 30 grand. I need to sell out whatever I need to do. And maybe they're still degening with money. And then once that floor drops a little bit, they have to sell that, then compounds that floor dropping even faster, but it should come back. And so really knowing those strike points too, I just did the same thing with Meebits and I got those as well, that they went up and down. And it's like, well, I can cash out or I can be confident in my purchase. And I think going through some cycles is key. If you can play the stock market game by yourself and be honest, you'll save yourself the money. If you don't, you're going to come in with real money. It's going to hurt way more. And I guarantee you, if you're new or coming in for the first time with real cash and you're bringing in 5-10 grand, even if you can afford to lose it, you're going to sell the bottom. Because you're not going to know any better. You're not going to have seen the cycles. You're not going to know a true conviction versus just hype versus just euphoria versus an influencer hype. You're not going to know those cycles and what they look like, and you're going to get burned. And then primarily when you do bring money in, my best advice is bring in whatever amount you can actually afford to go to zero. Pick true projects, teams, community you feel comfortable in. Stay in them for 3 to 6 months.
Exactly.
And if you can, and if you know you're going to flip it, do your flip. But once you can take out your 5 to 10 grand, so you have no cost basis in the ecosystem, then start kind of free rolling. And you can be a little more degen-y if you want. But most likely when you degen in, and it's funny, I just saw Tiny Thug the other day talking about it because he had some wins and he apparently recently had some bad losses. And that's kind of the cycle too. He's someone who has experience and he thinks he knows what he's doing, but he's still going to make wrong decisions too. And I have losses too. And so thinking you're only ever going to pick winners is just not going to be the case. But knowing when to sell or sell at a loss is just as important, because if you see the next thing for like me, for instance, me with Meebits, if I had 12 ETH, I spent it all. If I sold it 8 to get 8 ETH back, I lose 4 ETH. But if I can go put that 8 ETH into the next Quirky's or the next thing that I love, and I can triple that to 24, a lot better than me holding on to that 8 ETH. Maybe it goes back to 12 or maybe it goes to 16. So knowing what your potential upside is so important too, with anything you're holding, and where you want to, and if you want an easy management like a Bored Ape Yacht Club, or if you want like an active management like maybe Quirky's is kind of one of those too. Like where is it actually going to go into the future and what your conviction is on it. So
to parrot kind of what you said, it's definitely trial and error. I have most of my money, I would say 75% in projects that I don't intend on selling, until they hit, a huge number, or, at least 5-6 months, let them mature. And then I have, a small amount of money that I'm buying trash, or stuff that it's priced as trash that might not be trash. And like you said, it's not, people call it, some semantics, paper handing. You buy a project at 0.0, 0.08, and the next morning you wake up, it's at 0.05. That doesn't mean you need to sell it at 0.05 or undercut the floor at 0.04 and try to find something else. It means you need to put your phone down or whatever. Well, first go check, make sure there's actually people buying sales, and then say, okay, I've been a part of this project. I've been an investor for 10 minutes, go sleep 2 more days. You wait long enough, the floor does come back up and you remember, oh yeah, I remember I bought this project because a few days ago it was going the other way. And you like you said, you don't want to be involved in those kinds of projects with large scale money. I like to have my large scale money sitting in something where I know that I'm comfortable with it going up and down, because I'm not scared it's really going to go to zero. And like you said, you have to have your trigger points too. Like if it does get to this point, this is where we do make our exit. But you have to be in for the long haul if you really, I feel like if you want to make money. A lot of other guys, they flip this and that. But like you said, you'll end up looking and you'll end up making, $5 on 20 hours of work. And then all of a sudden you're like, this isn't as fun as I thought it was.
Right. And I think also too, if you are coming in, like if you just want to kind of get your cost basis back, the best thing I can say is go become a whitelist junkie, get into as many projects as you can, and then decide which ones you actually want to mint them, you get your 2 or 3x pre-reveal, sell it. And don't play the reveal game if you just are brand new. Like it's a way that it's almost like, it's going to sound weird, but like the whales are people that are, maybe don't care quite as much about their exact entry point. They're going to come in and buy those because they're like, all right, I really like this project. I believe in it. I want to go from my 3, maybe I got in whitelist, to 10, and I'm going to hold those. Let them play that game. But for you, if you're brand new, get in, take your 2x's, 3x's, and then jump the heck out. And it's not necessarily a dig at those projects, unless again, like you're just like, if you're an anime
It
guy,
establishes a pattern, a good pattern for you until you have more money to start doing those.
Yeah,
things.
there's that. But as I said, if it's a project you absolutely love, like no matter what happens, you just need this art, then fine. But also, you have to know it's an emotional decision, and you're doing that because you truly love what you're getting into. But you then can't decide, okay, if it's the other thing you can ask yourself, and you should really ask yourself, all right, I loved it when I minted at 0.2. I could sell at 0.4. Do I still love it at 0.15? And if you do, then great. And if you say in your head, if I had 0.15 at more, I'd buy at 0.15, then all right, you like the project and you have conviction. If you're going to be freaking out, if that 0.4 goes down to 0.15 and you're the person in the Discord that's going to be DMing, what's happening to the floor? Why is everyone selling? What's going on? If that's going to be you in any situation, you're overexposed and you don't really like the project. Now you can maybe go ask the question, hey, why are you selling? Did something change? Or was this your plan the whole time?
Mm-hmm.
And I saw actually Rice Farmer, a good follow on Twitter, post, hey, I have a lot of alpha, but I have no one to share with. Having the right group to share it with too, and knowing their actual intent is just as important. Knowing, are you here to flip? Are you here to hold? Are you here to collect? Like, where are you in your cycle as an investor? And that alpha should always be different. And because if you're sharing it with your flip group, well, that if 7 of 8 of you are going to just flip out right away, you don't want to be the 8th person that's stuck there while they are going to do other things. Versus if your group's a collector, like kind of what the one of ones has turned into in that chat on Quirky's, we're all pretty much collectors into whatever we're going into. And so we have a nice thing where we will flip some and take some profits here and there. And none of us are challenging each other when we sell anything. It's just like, hey, nice sale. Like, that's sick.
Mm-hmm.
And again, like we know that they're going to bring in some ETH and they're going to take some ETH out and they're going to still hold some Quirky's. And that's kind of the mentality that all of us have. But knowing who you're working with in that community too, or within your own micro community, is so important.
Yeah. All right. Well, Dave, I know you have to go. So Quirky fam, go follow Dave on Twitter at Dave versus Axey, AXIE. Great follow, great community member. Make sure you're following the official Quirky's at Quirky NFT. Follow the Quirkie Cast podcast at Quirkie Cast NFT. Jump on, on Twitter with us in spaces. We're in there. Dave is active when he can be. I'm active when I can be. We're, the community is broad. There's a lot of cool people. There's a lot of interesting people, from artists to engineers to whales to minnows like myself. We're all Quirky's, all 5,000 of us, that are out there. And then the companions are coming. There's a lot of cool stuff coming up. I'm excited for 2022 for all of us. Dave, any last words for the Quirky fan before? And we'll definitely have you back on again. This was too brief. I feel like you were definitely dropping some awesome stuff. I want to hear more about Axey's as well. So, but anything you want to say to the Quirky fan before we get out of here?
No, thank you for the time, Jordan. And Quirky's, I'll see you in spaces later on Twitter. But feel free to check me out. And we'll catch you guys next time.
All right. Till next time, Quirky fam.
In a wormhole, probably about to burn. In a white tunnel, are you ever gonna learn? See a land, probably gonna merge. Gonna be dead laying in the dirt. Funny how you smart, but you still a nerd.